let me just start again, like we talked about right now today. Taking NTI Day, tell us kind of the decision that went into that decision.
Yeah, unfortunately, the snow is coming down all day today, and it started about 4 a.m. And so we really had to decide whether or not we were going to try to get kids in schools and then possibly have to leave early, and it just wasn't worth the risk. And so with it continued to snow all day, and the city obviously will need time to clear the roads, and it's coming down consistently throughout the day. We thought it was just best to move forward with an NTI Day. NTI Day obviously is not my favorite thing to do, but it's an alternative to staying in school until June, and so it's just one of the options that we're given. So we utilize them especially when student safety is a consideration. So.
Yeah. I know how much you despise those three letters. Do you break out into hives when you say it?
Well, it is, you get both sides of the coin. There's some people that really appreciate it and are just excited to have it, and then you have the other side that dreads it, and so. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, I was telling someone the other day, they were asking about whether or not it is if it's a hard decision to make a NTI. It's not so hard to make the call because it's about student safety at the end of the day, but it is certainly one of the most controversial decisions I have to make. But erring on the side of student safety is a no-brainer, so it kind of goes in that direction. And so I'm glad we have that option. I mean, prior to the pandemic, that wasn't even an option, and it was simply you had to make these days up at the end of the year. And so it's better than our students just sitting at home without much to do at all.
Mm-hmm. So, how did the experiences, the angst of last month figure into this decision today? Sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you like that.
Well, again, I've learned you're not going to please everyone. And at the end of the day, again, I sleep well at night knowing that I'm putting student safety first. And we've utilized NTI before. It is not an ideal situation. Nothing is better than in-person learning for the mass majority of our students. But it's an alternative to, again, having to make days up at the end of the year and having to really inconvenience parents even further, because so many of our families look at our calendars a year in advance to determine their summer plans and all of those things. So we try to be as accommodating as we can, but the weather this year has been quite interesting, and it's just mid-February, so and the groundhog saw his shadow, so apparently we have a little bit more to go, so we'll just wait and see.
Yeah, I'm from rural Illinois, and I told Bill Meck, I said, listen, I've done my penance, okay? I mean, days of snow drifts up to the roof, and I said, getting out at 6 a.m. to shovel out before I went to school, I'm like, I'm good. Yeah. I don't need to see it.
And I'm from Texas, so I will tell you, up until this last storm, I loved when
Sure.
And I was telling my assistant the other day, I said, I no longer enjoy the snow any longer at all.
No mas.
Yeah, I'm done.
Exactly.
I'm done.
Yeah. My wife's in Tennessee, same thing.
Yeah,
she's a Southern girl, and she's like, okay, where have you brought me? I go, I know, it's normally not like this.
Yeah.
So, well, tell me, you're from Texas. Tell me about where your passion for education, like where did that start? Your parents, family, teachers, where did that begin for you?
Well, actually, I'm the first educator in my family. I was raised by my grandmother mostly, who had a 9th grade education, but she was passionate about education. And I actually wrote about this in my dissertation. Her father who was illiterate, married her mother, my great-grandmother, in part because she was literate and he wanted to make sure that his kids could read. And so that was something that was just really instilled in my grandma, and she made it very, very clear that education was of extreme importance. And as you walked into her home, actually very modest home, but I remember still, it's seared in my brain, where she had all 6 of her kids in their high school graduation cap and gowns as a focal point in her living room. That's how important it was. And so my greatest gift to her was to not only graduate high school, but to go on, and she was alive long enough to see me get a PhD and be a superintendent, which to her was just I mean, the end all to all things. And so it really came from instilled in her, and then educators throughout. I grew up very poor, so educators were my saving grace throughout my academic career growing up. And so I've leaned very heavily on teachers that cared about me, on counselors that really encouraged me. And I didn't even think I could go to college. I had no examples of anyone in my family that had gone to college prior to myself. And so I had a counselor that actually called me in and encouraged me to go to college, saw that I had a very nice GPA and was and really encouraged me to do that. And and so I owe my entire career, my entire life that I live today to educators that have really taken the time to invest in me and saw something in me to make me want to continue and move on.
Yeah, boy, it's neat to see, to hear about the passion of where it comes from. I think we all have those stories and those people in your family or in the community. So, but again, it sounds like this was a lifelong passion for you, even as a small child.
Oh, absolutely. I remember, I can still name my kindergarten teacher all the way to, I can't name all of once I got into changing classes in high school, but I still keep in touch with many of my teachers, and it is just something that, and I've seen that over the 25 years I've been in education, I've seen it evolve so much from the time I was in the classroom to now. And one of the things I tell teachers now all the time is I'm here to listen, because I understand that 25 years ago when I started in the classroom, things have drastically changed. And the pandemic really changed a lot of things in the classroom. And so right now I'm still learning quite a bit, even as a superintendent. One of the things I used to be very proud of, and I could say, because I was a teacher and then a principal at elementary, middle, and high school. And I was like, I understand all levels, I can do this. But after the pandemic, I realized I really need to sit back and listen a lot more, understand what's actually going in the classroom, and respond to teachers according to what they're experiencing now. And so I really take time to humble myself, listen, and try to provide the support that they need, because I feel that that's ultimately what my role is as superintendent, is to support the work that's happening in our classrooms and on our campuses each day.
You were a superintendent for several years in Texas, and now almost 4 years here. You came here during the pandemic. You mentioned it had its own set of challenges. What's the biggest difference that you've seen between the job you came from and the job you have here? I mean, every situation has its own set of challenges.
Well, Kentucky is very unique, and many of its laws, many of its regulations are different than what I had experienced in Texas. And so really just learning the Kentucky way, if you will, really dealing with school-based decision-making teams is something that I've really had to understand a lot more over the years, and realize the authority that lies within them, and respect that. There were always been site-based decision teams or school-based decision-making teams, even while I was in Texas, but the authority given to them by statute here in Kentucky is a lot more than in any other place in the nation, I've learned. And so really respecting that authority. And quite often you will have people that will complain to me about something that a site-based decision-making team did, and really trying to explain the fact that there's an immense amount of authority given to our individual sites and our schools when it comes to the courses that they're offering and the things, the curriculum that campus in particular is able to offer. There's plenty of things that we can do as a system-wide approach, but there's many things that I want to respect and really give those people who are elected to those roles by their peers and their families to be able to make those decisions, and really work very closely to make sure that we're doing things that are going to consistently impact the broader system positively. But that's been one of the biggest challenges, our differences, I guess. And
do you find that a comfort or a frustration that you have that?
Depends on the day.
Okay. Fair enough.
I mean, sometimes it's very much, ideally, I want a community school to be able to offer the courses that they feel are important to their school, to their kids, that what they feel passionate about. But there's other things where I'm like, this is something that's important and I think should be offered system-wide. And so those are times where I really go to the board and say, is there time for us to look at a policy change to say that these are things that's going to happen system-wide. But of course, you have to look at the fiscal responsibility and all of that, those impacts that are involved in that. So for example, we have some schools that are, I'm a strong advocate and proponent of fine arts. And some schools determine that they want, some schools have multiple fine arts offerings, and some schools feel like we want one fine arts offerings and we want a STEM offering and we want another type of offering. And it's really good for them to have that autonomy, I think, because it really gets down to, when you talk about local control, really gets to the core of not only is it locally with Fayette County Public Schools as a whole, but it gets to the local point of the families and the teachers on that campus saying this is what's important to our student population and the direction we want to go.
That's interesting because, there will always be people who will complain, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the fact that they do have that kind of decision making, that it's kind of out of your hands. And so like you said, some days you have to explain to a parent, okay, I'm with you, but this is what this group decided, and they have the elected right to do that.
Yes.
So.
And it's, I mean, it's really, and who am I to really go in and tell them this small section, if it is something that is, of course I would go in if it was something basket weaving, for example, and say, well, this isn't an appropriate curriculum to offer. But I mean, I can't choose between STEM and music. I mean, they're both very important. They're both very much going to contribute to the success of a child. And if that is a decision that a site-based decision-making team has made, I respect that and make sure that they have opportunities to be the best at whatever it is that they decided that their students are going to learn. And so that's where my role comes in making sure that whatever those courses are that they've decided that they want to offer, is that we're supporting those in a manner that our students are going to have an advantage in being their best at learning those things.
Want to get into kind of more recently, congratulations, you got the board's behind you, the new contract. You did have some opposition where you had more than 1,000 signatures on a petition that did not want to see you brought back. That's not a large percentage, but it is significant. How do you go forward here now that you're here and you'll be in place for several years to address those concerns and reach those people that had some questions about you?
Well, first of all, I'm very open to feedback. I think feedback is the breakfast of champions, and I really love hearing when people disagree with me, when people have concerns, because that's the only way I get better. That's the only way we get better as a system, and so I welcome that. I'm not offended by it by any means, and I actually appreciate the fact that people are open to dialogue. One of the things that I do wish would occur more is that dialogue. A petition, although I mean on both sides was an interesting dynamic. I think we can resolve a lot more issues by sitting down and actually having dialogue about what others' concerns are. And there's a lot of information out there that just wasn't true, that just in fact wasn't accurate by any stretch of the imagination. So I think having a dialogue would be a lot more helpful. But I've listened to some concerns of some of the individuals and are really reflecting on those and making sure that I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that every student in Fayette County Public Schools receive the best education possible that they can. And I think at the end of the day, that's what any family wants for their children. I think that's what our community wants for their public school system. And so I'm always listening, always learning, and always just trying to be a better version of myself as a leader in order to deliver on the promise that our students will graduate and according to our portrait of a graduate, and receive the quality education that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. What were a couple of examples of those things that were out there that weren't true, that kind of led to some of the discontent?
Some of the things, for example, it was about the Ron Clark Academy and the fact that we had invited Ron Clark, who is Ron Clark was a Disney Teacher of the Year. He actually currently operates the Ron Clark Academy, which is a world-renowned academy that deals mostly with minoritized students, and they do phenomenal things for those students. And most of those students come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, and many of the backgrounds that we struggle with here in Fayette County is getting them to perform as high as some of our other students. And so the fact that we have people go to that campus to learn from them, the fact that he was invited in, some people thought, you're inviting a private school person in, that's going to, that's not an equivalent. But at the end of the day, I mean, Ron Clark Academy, although it is indeed a private school, it's not your typical private school. Most families pay $45 a month. It's sponsored heavily by national organizations and corporations, and the work that they do with these students, and it is a great example that we all can learn from. I've gone to the academy in a previous district, and I've just been thoroughly impressed with the things that they're doing. We have plenty of systems in place now that have really helped the success we've had in the last 4 years here in Fayette County, that were an exact replica of what teachers and principals and staff have learned from the Ron Clark Academy and came back here to mirror it to impact our students. And so, I mean, we can learn from anyone. And so just because it's a quote unquote private school, that doesn't mean that there's not quality learning taking place there and things that can help us, which has been proven by the results we've received by implementing many of the things that we've learned in that location.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a minute too. I've been down there, done some stories there, been there 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
You're right. You walk out of the building going, gee, what, really?
So,
I mean,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I want to kind of give you a chance to kind of clean up some of the stuff that's been talked about. One of the issues that was brought up was the appropriation of funds, and there was the report about there was a couple $100,000 spent in furniture. How do you respond to that?
Well, that report is indeed accurate. One of the things that we were able to do, we did when I came in, one of the things I learned and heard over and over is the ineffectiveness of HR and the fact that it would take people forever to be hired. And by the time people were offered a job by HR and by the time their paperwork was processed, could be up to 6 weeks. And many of the times, by the time we got to the 6 weeks, those teachers were gone and had gotten a job elsewhere. And so I went to the board and talked about this concern. They commissioned a study, and it determined that our HR department was woefully understaffed for an organization as large as we are. And so we committed the funds from the board to actually improve the staffing for human resources. And as a result, we had to hire new people. Those people had to have some place to work, and so that requires furniture. And so we did buy new furniture for those people, those new employees that we were able to hire. One of the things that is not shared, though, is we were the only district in Kentucky this past year as a result of those new hiring practices and the new personnel that had no vacancies in any classroom in our district. Well, they were filled with highly qualified individuals. And it was as a result of the minimized amount of time it took from telling someone they had the job to finalizing their paperwork and getting them on board. And so it's really been a benefit to our students, it's been a benefit to our organization, and in an area and a time where there's such a huge discrepancy between the amount of applicants and the amount of candidates that are actually chosen, and so many other districts. Again, no other district in the entire state was fully staffed on day one except Fayette County Public Schools. And so that helps our students, and we realize that now the teaching profession is not as popular as it used to be, where we used to have hundreds of applications for one position. Right now, that's just not simply the case. And so it has really given us an advantage, and I feel it was certainly an investment that was worth it, and we got a return on it for sure, because now we have many more experienced teachers, and as a result, we have, for the first time in history, none of our campuses are identified as needing an improvement. And I think that is directly linked to some of the services that we've been able to provide.
A model of what Governor Beshear has talked about for years in terms of attracting those teachers and retention, and you're doing that here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Another issue that came up during these past several weeks, there were some people that challenged your support of teachers, and I would give you a chance to respond to that criticism.
Well, I'm really not sure where that comes from. I think if you were to speak to the mass majority of the teachers here, I'm very open. I've implemented several systems to make sure that I'm listening to teachers. Not only do I meet with I recognize we have Fayette Education Association president every single month. I also meet with the board that represents the Fayette Education Association that meets with the teachers, representatives, the board that they voted on. I meet with them on a regular basis as well. I've implemented something called Super Chats, which is our classified staff, or every single individual, every single campus has an individual that they vote on to come meet with me on a regular basis. And it's an anonymous way for them to just ask any question they can about anything. I also have something what we call the meetings, which are transparent, honest exchanges. The is an acronym for that, where principals get to talk to me. It's just me and principals. No one else is in the room to really get to talk about any questions they have about anything. Their supervisors aren't in the room. No one is in the room but us. And we have some very serious dialogue. I will tell you that was the biggest surprise to me, because one of the things that I've prided myself in is the fact that I'm very open. I think I have to be connected to the people in the classroom in order to really know what's going on. And so no one has given me any specific examples of how that can be better, but I'm certainly open to that. But some of the things that I've implemented, I've heard many great compliments about the openness and the access that I've provided to our teachers. And so, but certainly open to further feedback should there need to be more of that.
You took the job in 2021 in the middle of COVID and all the issues that came with that. How do you feel that FCPS has rebounded from that time?
Man, I will tell you, we're still rebounding. Statistics and data show that we're rebounding faster than the nation, which we're very proud of, and I certainly attribute to our hardworking teachers and staff. But there's still things that we're discovering from the pandemic that continues to plague us. I mean, we still have not reached the heights of pre-pandemic success. We still, I mean, our students still continue to suffer from, some of the socio-emotional things that occurred during the pandemic. I think kids had an opportunity to really become more in touch with their needs outside of just simply academics, but what they need emotionally and socially, and so we continue to provide those services. But I think we have a generation of students that were in the pandemic that we will continue for this entire, until they're all graduated. Well, we'll probably be saying, oh, those are the pandemic babies. Those are the kids that were during the pandemic, if you'll recall. It's very hard, of the many things that we've done. I mean, it's hard to learn to read online. It's a very, very, reading and learning it's a very personal experience. I mean, I still remember the perfume of my second grade teacher, as she said, and so it's those things that really, I think, are so personal, and that's hard to get online. And so that's really hurt some of our students. We've done quite a bit to try to overcome that, but I don't think it'll completely, totally ever be done away with. I think those students will always live with some piece of that.
Yeah. Aside from those issues, and there's a lot of them. I mean, it's more than what we can even imagine what you've gone through to try to keep that going, get the ship back in place. Are you satisfied with the way you responded to those things and the progress you have made in these 3.5 years since then?
Absolutely. I will tell you, the fact that we're outperforming the national average really speaks volumes to the work that's happening here. Of course, we want to continue to grow and continue to get better, and there's so many other things that we still can do and that we're trying to implement to ensure that we continue on that trajectory. but we're pleased with the progress we're going. Teachers have been asked to take on so much, and so you really can only give teachers so much at one time. They're human beings, and so we're trying to make sure that we give enough to make sure everyone's challenged and to make sure that we're making the progress necessary, but not so much that people are overburdened and burned out. So you have to kind of find that balance to make sure that that's where we land, and I think that we found a fine area to do that right now.
Yeah. To your credit, I want to throw some numbers out. Great improvement in those schools needing more attention. State assessment report showed the number of Fayette County schools requiring federal intervention has dropped out of 55 schools from 34 in 2022 to 21 in 2023 to 12 last year. I mean, you've cut that number by 2/3. What is your reaction to that? I mean, that's you got it when you hear those numbers, and that last October the last numbers were released, for 2024. That's not everybody. It's not 100%, but that's got to feel gratifying that you've done that in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it's really, I give all credit to our campuses and the work that they're doing, the hard work that's happening in our classrooms every single day, and making sure that we're looking at individual kids, not groups of kids, and not, to make sure that every kid matters. Every kid is an individual with individual needs. And so we've taken it down to that level. And so very proud of the work. Very proud that we're making that progress. We've had many of other districts throughout the nation reach out to us to ask what we're doing to do that, and so I've really invited many of them in to see the work, so hopefully it can be replicated. But it's a testament to the hard work that's happening every single day on our campuses, and all of the support that is happening to support our campuses as well.
Your passion here is clear. Education for the students, the teachers, everyone involved that's under your purview. What's the one thing looking back in these 3.5 years that you wish you would have done differently than you did?
I always look at communication. I feel like if I could be a much better proactive communicator, I think that would be best. I think we did quite well during the pandemic. I did a weekly update to families of this is what's happening, this is what we're doing. And I think because at that time it was very warranted. And once the pandemic, quote unquote, was behind us, I stopped communicating proactively as much. And I've realized that our families appreciated that proactive communication. I think it really answered a lot of questions before they even became questions. And so one of the things I'm looking at now is getting back into the routine of really informing our families of the process that is involved in the decision making. This is an extremely complex organization. We have over 40,000 students. We have over 8,000 full and part-time employees, and lots of moving parts. And so trying to find that fine balance. I don't want to become white noise, if you will, and they're like, here's another email from the superintendent, but also finding the fine line to where it's, oh, I appreciate hearing from the superintendent so regularly. So trying to find that balance to make sure that our families and our community is well informed, but not overwhelmed with information.
You have the confidence of the school board, 4 more years. You're in place right now. You've done so much already to bring us out of where we were to present day. What do these next 4 years look like? What for, not just for Dr. Liggins, but for the students and the community here?
Well, first, we want to get those 12 campuses to 0. And so I think that would really be a strong recognition of the work that's happening and the progress that has occurred. Also, we want to make sure that every single student, we continue to raise our graduation rate, and that every single student understands that they have a role and a place, not only within our school system while they're here, but they have a purpose and a plan once they graduate. And so that is something that I'm really passionate about, in ensuring that not one child leaves high school without knowing what their next steps are or what their options are, and being able to pursue those. Another big one also that we're really working on is our early childhood initiative. We have discovered, and it's been for years and decades, our achievement gap actually doesn't begin when students start testing on state assessments in 3rd grade. It begins in kindergarten when we receive kids on day 1. We see that there is a a huge discrepancy between those students that come to us, usually those students with means versus those students with lesser means. And so really continuing to work with our community partners to let our families know how to work with their children before they arrive in kindergarten so that we can increase our kindergarten readiness rate, because it really gives our students an advantage, and it makes our teachers a lot more confident in being able to start on day one from a starting point to move forward instead of having to go backwards to try to move forward. And so I think having both ends of that, the spectrum, before they get here and after they leave us, and making sure while they're here they have plenty of opportunity to explore, discover themselves, and realize that they have a place to belong.
Okay, a couple more questions. I want to take a lot of your time. There's a lot of grumbling in Washington about change. A new president was elected to bring about change. There's discussion about the Department of Education going away. How much sleep do you lose every night with the thought of losing potentially federal funding? I mean, you're doing what you're doing with the budget you have. What about if some of that goes away? I mean, as an educator, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting space to be in. I mean, we have millions of dollars in federal grants that come to the district. I mean, most of our services for our most vulnerable students come from federal dollars, our special education students, many of our economically disadvantaged students, it's our free and reduced lunch, and so many programs that really help those students that are most vulnerable. And so it's very difficult. We're actually in the budgeting season now to try to build a budget for next year, and it's a lot of what ifs. It's a lot of we're not quite sure yet, and so trying to plan for those things have become increasingly difficult. And so really we're just trying to make the best decisions with the information we have that unfortunately often changes day to day or week by week. And so really making the best decisions we can with the information we have at that time. And unfortunately it's just where we're at right now. And so, we're in the same boat as every other district across America. So we're just trying to make the best of it and make sure that we continue to do things for kids that we know matter, and deal with those bridges as we have to cross them should we come to that.
Yeah. It's Black History Month. You're someone as an African American man in a position that you succeed as an African American man, which in itself is unusual. There are not many men who look like you who have this position. How important is the acknowledgement of Black History Month for the young people of all races in this district and across the country?
Well, I tell people often that, Black history is American history. I think it's just as important for little Black boys to see me in a role like this as it is for little white boys, little white girls, little Asian, Latino kids. I think the more that as a society we can embrace our diversity, that we can embrace the fact that we all matter, we all should be celebrated, and that we all contribute, the better. So Black History Month is something that I certainly embrace. I consider myself a proud patriot, and so I love the fact that we continue here in Fayette County to celebrate all people. And I don't see that changing under my leadership at all. I think this month we're celebrating Black History Month. Next month we're going to celebrate Women's History Month just as proudly and just as strong, because it's just as important. And so I appreciate when anyone looks to me as an example or a role model, but I don't think I'm doing anything special that someone else can't do. But if they take from me and they're inspired to do something, that's really where I'm most appreciative and really thankful that God has given me this opportunity to be in that role.